everybody can find their seats, we're going to go ahead and get started. We'll give our tech folks a beat. Presentation set to auto?
No, I got it. I'm clicking it to the next part.
Okay.
You good?
You're freaking me out.
I know, I'm sorry. Technology.
Too early for this to be haunted. Good morning, everybody. Thanks so much for joining us here in downtown Lexington for our symposium that the Gain Center has been so gracious to host for us and help us put together. Today you're going to hear about a series of projects that are part of the Central Kentucky Slavery Initiative, the initiative that I direct at the University of Kentucky. It's under the umbrella of what we like to call CIBS, but is the Commonwealth Institute for Black Studies, the research arm of African American and Africana Studies at UK. I am a scholar of slavery, and I'm actually a specialist in Virginia. When I moved down here from Michigan State almost 7 years ago now, I wasn't sure where my next project would go. I actually thought I'd stay in Virginia, I'd go a little further back in time than my first project. But because I have such wonderful colleagues, fairly quickly into my tenure here at UK, I was introduced to the absolute wealth in source material about the Commonwealth of Kentucky that is available. I study a place that was burnt to the ground in 1865. So there's a lot of burnt records. There are a lot of places that lost just about everything in the United States Civil War. But the thing about Kentucky is that didn't happen in Lexington. There are some parts of the state that certainly were affected by the American Civil War, but a lot of places here have intact records in ways that aren't possible in other places in the US South. And as a result of this also being one of the most important hubs of the internal slave trade, there's a volume of documents available here about the business of slavery that can still tell us something about enslaved people. So today, it's my pleasure to highlight the many collaborations within the CKSI that are helping a range of scholars, community members, and partnerships in our local community to bring and make available sources on African Americans and African American life during slavery, as well as the history of this Commonwealth. African Americans have an incredibly important place in the history of Kentucky, and free and enslaved people, in many ways literally built the Commonwealth, at the same time that Black innovation, Black genius, were a huge part of making the key industries of the Commonwealth successful. So today you're going to hear projects aimed at making documentation of African American life more readily available to broader publics. You're going to hear about the ways that working with librarians means that you get to make source material that in some ways really only Kentucky can offer available to more people and really in an inclusive model of harvesting those materials. And you'll get to hear from a fine artist who engages with history and does historical work, but has a very different methodology than historians and librarians, and brings us to a close today with just a glimpse of the ways that African American artistry impacted the Commonwealth in the midst of overwhelming labor extraction and oppression. So it's my pleasure today to play host. The presenters today were all anxious because my name's not on the flyer. And I said, well, that's because I'm trying to actually highlight the many brilliant people that really are making these projects work. I'm involved in all of them, but it's not me. It's whole teams of people who come together with an incredible range of expertise to make these projects happen. And on our first panel today, you're going to see a really great example of community and university partnership. It's interesting, when I talk about these projects around town, sometimes people sort of blanch a little bit and think, well, people at UK are working on slavery? Is that a thing that's happening? Well, yeah, but it's not just people at UK. The first project that I have to introduce to you today is the Digital Access Project, or DAP for short. And it is a project aimed at digitizing all, that's right, all extant deed books in the county clerk's office, just right down the street. Today, you are going to hear from a range of experts that work on this project who come from very, very different sets of expertise. We have Kathy Newfont on our panel today. Among other things, our resident Appalachianist and environmental historian who's done an incredible amount of work with students and really labbing in pedagogy how to digitize and make these deeds more widely available and accessible. We've got with us Shay Brown today, deputy clerk down at the clerk's office, who I think maybe you've probably read every single document in the deed books.
Yes, twice.
Twice. And off the top of his head, knows these documents forwards and backwards, and has been an incredibly key part of the digitization process. And then you're also going to get to meet some of our student workers. We've got Shelby here with us today, who's representing the grad student contingent and was with us with the early pilot version last summer and has stayed with us over time. And we also got Mason with us, who actually started as one of Kathy's students and is now down in the clerk's office on a regular basis and is about to start library school soon. So we've also got some other DAP team members out in the audience. I'm not gonna make you stand, but I will have you wave. Can you practice your come on, the coronation's coming. Let's practice our royal wave. There we go. Folks who are community members who come in some 2 days a week to work on the digitization process. And it's been a really lovely experience to combine community members who have the now almost disappeared skill of reading cursive with many students who have less experience with that, so that between the meld of generations, we can move forward a richer and fuller project. Thank you all for coming today. So to get us started today, Shay Brown is gonna talk about what exactly a deed book is and what deeds can do for us. And then we'll hear from Kathy about the process of developing this work with students, and then we'll actually get to hear from actual students about their experiences in this archive and with this project. So without further ado, I'm gonna run over there and be on tech duty, and I'm gonna turn it over to them.
Hello, everyone. Thank Dr. Holden. A deed, she says, what is a deed? A deed is a document, an instrument, a record that conveys, transfers, or sells property to another person. Typically, we know a deed today deals with a house. You sell the house to a buyer, and you prepare a deed, and that deed transfers from the owner to the new buyer. And it typically deals with real estate. But back in the history of Kentucky, it did not only deal with real estate, but it dealt with personal property in consideration of a human being that was identified as a slave. So I began the project by saying, who is a Negro woman named Millie? And we're gonna see what the Digital Assets Project can do to uncover for us about who the Negro woman named Millie is from deed records and wills. Digital Access Project, DAP. That's the project we working with. We bring to light more than 60,000 pages of records spanning from the late 1700s to 1865. That's what the project is. Dr. Holden is correct. We're digitizing all those records, deeds, wills, indices, and then we're eventually going to go to the order books and cover that time period of records that talk about enslaved individuals, but not only enslaved individuals, but all information that pertains to genealogy, to title research, to anybody who wants to search property pertaining to the information they're looking for. We got to understand the history behind the Kentucky County Court Clerk. Records reveal that black humans were classified as personal property, therefore sold, transferred, conveyed, auctioned off, mortgaged as security, appraised as inventory, and even bestowed to another person as a gift upon a testator's death in a last will and testament. DAP is known as the Digital Access Project. It's a partnership between the University of Kentucky Commonwealth Institute of Black Studies, the Lexington Black Posterity Initiative, the Fayette County Clerk's Office, and we're funded by the Bluegrass Community Foundation and the Knight Foundation Donor Advised Charitable Fund. That's the partnership. It's taking place down at the Fayette County Clerk's Office. We began this project last year, May the 23rd, 2022, by digitizing our first general index book to deeds and mortgages. And we're continuing to do this, and we have completed 137 books of digitization. We right now are performing quality control. We're looking through identifying the images in a systematic numerical fashion because the county clerk's office has engaged into a new online portal. The online portal currently offers records from 1990 on forward, visible online for the community. Here in the next couple months or so, we plan to offer our first phase of images, deeds, wills, and their indices online. Yay!
Yay! This is a huge triumph.
Yes, it is. And DAP has some issues that we know that when you're looking at these old pages, they came from the old courthouse to the other courthouses that's been built in that location, all the way down to the county clerk's office. There's bad weather. There was decay. The buildings had leaks and water damages, and there was a fire in 1803 that damaged some of the records that we digitized the burnt records from the fire. The first county clerk, Levi Todd, stored those records at his residence off of Richmond Road area, and they set a fire to it and burnt the records. But the records that were salvaged in 1818, a court appeals allowed it to be transcribed. So we still have those burnt records. They're valuable. They're only fragment pieces. So those who had their original documents were able to come and refile those documents at the county clerk, and we file those records in deed books A, B, C, and D. But we will have those images available. So there are difficulties with the pages. They misnumbered the pages. You know, we count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. They counted 1, 2, 3, 6, 8, 10, 20, 100. And so we don't know why they did that, and they skipped numbers, and so we have to deal with all those challenges with DAP. Digitization challenges, some of the print looks like that, spotty. Some of them we have to grayscale. You won't see it good on this, but when you at home on your computer, you can zoom in to grayscale and actually see the print of what it reads, and the quality will be good. If we did not grayscale it, you would not be able to read the words of it. So the print may not print out good, but on a digital image, you can use enhanced features to see it. Some of the challenges we had is spotty documents, spotty records. You can see all the spots on the records, and they're spotty.
Literal spots.
Yeah, yeah.
Literal.
Some of we had to grayscale some of them to make them a little bit darker. Obviously, the print is hard to see, but on a digital image, you can zoom in and actually read what the words are. This one is a one you can see on the side of it, the pages. I don't know what happened, why some of the part of the records are torn. You know, don't ask me why I was not back there. I know I look like I was back there in 1700s, but I don't know, but their pages are torn. Some of them we have to crop. When we crop the features, we have to overlap into another page so you can see little pieces of wordings from the other page. but you can be able to tell where a page begins and ends. And some of it was really torn like that when you can't hardly read all of the words of it, but you can kind of infer what it is. Thing about DAP, it will provide the public with visibility and access digitally to the information found within these books. Secondly, it will provide an opportunity for the public to utilize these records to explore effective cultural enrichment conversations for establishing racial reconciliation and to gain exposure to the history surrounding racial barriers here in Kentucky. Thirdly, it will help educate and enlighten the public on the current growing concerns associated with racial injustice and inequality. So someone comes in the office real quickly, and as I close that, they ask, let's take an example, and we're going to look for Sarah Johnson. You go to the index book I through L, because J appears in between there, page 102. Look for Sarah Johnson. It'll look like that. We know that Sarah Johnson died in 1842, so the first entry deals with Sarah Johnson in 1865. So we know that that's not the one we're looking at. But the one underneath, you can see Sarah Johnson. It's in Will Book P. It's hard to make out what it is, but what Fayette County has done with our online portal, you can go browse the http://FayetteDeeds.com. You can click on land record search. And you may not have time to write all this down, but I will have this information for those who have questions or want to know. But you go to land record search, click on search prior to July 1989, click on land records prior to 1986, click on the wills from 1793 to 1985, type in the surname Johnson, given name Sarah, find the will booking page, click next, and what you'll do, we don't have the images loaded, but you have the will book P, page 484 through 485. So once you find that, you'll be able to see that image. Now, what's important about that image is some of the transcription we want to look at for Sarah Johnson. Some of the transcription, when you look at for the metadata, is the fact that she is saying in there important information. It is my will and desire that, look, 10 acres of land that I now live on is given and bequeathed to a Negro woman named Millie, which was emancipated by will of my brother Horatio Johnson, deceased, to her and her heirs forever. Now, this will was done in 1843, prior to 1865. She conveyed 10 acres of land to a former slave named Millie. I don't know what her last name is, but we know her first name is Millie. Now, think what you can do with 10 acres. I'm glad you asked me, since we're dealing with deeds. Today, with 1 acre, you can do 4 deeds to put 4 houses on an acre. So if she had 10 acres times 4, she could have built 40 houses back then in 1843. Wow. Think of the wealth and the value of that. So now we know that the person named Millie was set free in her brother's deed, named Horatio. So you go back to that index I through L from 1794 to 1903. Look up Horatio Johnson, page 76. You'll look and you'll see his will in there, what will he has, what will book is entitled to him, and you'll discover that the will that he had was in Will Book M. Or you can go to an online portal, do the same steps, which is easier. You have Will Book M, page 173 to 174, and you'll see that will. What's important about that will is that metadata. We'll try to get some metadata. I have also a Negro woman named what? Millie. She is hired out during the year of 1835, at the expiration of which time I hereby emancipate and set her free. So in Horatio Johnson's will, he set Millie free. Millie went to still live with his sister, Sarah Johnson, as a hired person. And after Sarah died, she left Millie 10 acres. And that's his will. The image quality looks good. You'll be able to see it, zoom in, read it word for word. And then you go to the book M, look for Millie. Page 143, Milley, Milly. You can get an index for Millie. Do we know if it's the same person? You got to do a little research to find out. You can go through Millie, Milly, page 145. See the index of it? Look at the book and page reference. Go to that actual book and page that we have the images of, and you can do your own research. So look, from here, you need to explore other searchable resources to determine, if possible, the status of said Millie after the time period. So what will the online portal soon offer? You'll be able to go to the general indexes and search by alpha, grantor, and grantee. Find the book and page reference. Go to the book and scroll down to the page you need. That's step one. That will make the public happy. You don't have to come to our office. I'll be glad to see you. But you can do this at home in your PJs. Online portal eventually plans to offer searchable index of grantor and grantee attached with the image provided. Work can be done by the county clerk's office as well as volunteers and DAP as well. And then we hopefully offer a link to the University of Kentucky containing just basic metadata transcriptions. Some of the bad records, we will try to transcribe it to make it user-friendly for the people, but we're going to highlight what we can and offer for the public. It's still a work in progress, but I'm so excited for what DAP will offer for the global world. Thank you.
Woo! It's always a pleasure to share the stage with Mr. Shay Brown. I'm going to drop back in time a little bit to talk about we just heard about the amazing work that's going on with the Digital Access Project. The collaborations between UK and the Fayette County Clerk's Office go back before the Digital Access Project became possible to do. And so I want to talk just a little bit about the origins of that collaboration that the students that you see here on the stage are kind of the current version of that ongoing. So these are, this is a picture from our early collaboration. That is Shay in the deeds office. I want to give you a couple of images of the originals. Shay's just talked to us about the digital versions of these, and I want you to see what, if you go down to the deeds office, what the books and so on look like. So these are some students from a 2016 class, the very first class that we collaborated on, and that's Shay working with the students to introduce them to the deeds. He's taking them to the index and then taking them to the deeds. And that era, before we imagined the Digital Access Project could be possible, what we were trying to do was go and find deeds related to enslaved people and to free black people in antebellum Lexington, and we're just trying to find them. Now and that meant going there in person to do that work, and students were involved in finding them. So that's what we're doing here. Yeah, thank you. This is the spring 2016 course. That's Raynette Jones is in the lower corner. We'll hear from her later today. She was kind of one of our guardian angels, one of the magicians that Dr. Holden was talking about at UK Libraries. Raynette has spent her career building out what we know about Black history in Kentucky and was a huge supporter of this project. I'm not sure I would have undertaken it. I was brand new at UK at the time, and without her support, I really don't know that I ever would have met Shay and become part of this project. So I really want to shout out Raynette there. The other person in the lower corner there is Drew Reisinger, and my own connection, as Dr. Holden mentioned, I'm an Appalachian historian and an environmental historian. My connection to this work grew out of the Appalachian components because I was involved in western North Carolina when I lived there with a project in Buncombe County, which is in the Asheville area of North Carolina, if you know the area at all. Anyway, Drew Reisinger is the Register of Deeds there, and he and a collaborative group there had worked on finding and digitizing the Buncombe County deed. So I don't want to talk a lot about that, but I was peripherally involved with that project. So when I came here to UK, I had seen how important that work could be for students and for communities, and I wanted to see if it were possible to do that when I was assigned a history workshop class which is designed to introduce students to basic historical research. And there are multiple ways to teach that class. For me, I always want students to, there's so much real history that needs to be dug up. Let's do that. So I was really excited to start that. That's Drew down there. And then these are the students on their very first day down in the deeds office. That's Shay's colleague, Meredith Watson, showing them the initial books. And then if we can go forward. These are the indexes Shay mentioned. We are very fortunate in Lexington, Kentucky to have these indexes in the Fayette County Clerk's office. That's not typical in most counties. There was nothing like that in the Buncombe County example, for instance. In Buncombe County, you're literally going through page after page after page, basically what the Digital Access Project is doing, except you're not doing it to digitize, you're just doing it to find the deeds. Whereas in the indexes here, as Shay talked about, you can go to the names and find them. So this is this is a photograph of Henry Clay's entry in the index. It goes 4.5 pages, and there are many, many, many enslaved people who are in the Clay documents. This is what the deed books look like. Shay gave us the digital versions. That's what the DAP team is working with to try and turn those, make those available digitally. They're huge books. You could tell that a little bit from Meredith. Yeah, can we briefly look at the Mary Todd document? Okay, so one of the first documents that we found down here is the will of Mary Todd, free woman of color. My colleague, Amy Taylor, actually found this document. And this is from 1842. She is a free woman. She's gravely ill, and this is her last will and testament. And if we can go forward, this is, just as an example, Shay just gave us the example of if we're trying to track Millie's history, and that's all we know about her, what do we do? This will is such a rich source because I've highlighted, it's not very elegant, but the names that we can find in here are in green. The relationships that we can find are in blue, and the actions are in yellow. And so if we go forward one. So there are 8 names of people. These were free black people in Lexington. So although this is part of the Central Kentucky Slavery Initiative, we actually can learn a lot about free black people, as Shay mentioned before. So these people are all mentioned here. And then if we go forward, the relationships, Mary Todd is leaving. John Henry Todd is her grandson and her primary beneficiary. Samuel Oldham is the guardian for that person. Mary Todd is making arrangements for an 8-year-old girl, Ann Ennis, who is in her home. She talks about Mrs. Hannah Tucker, her friend and executrix, and she makes it very clear that she wants Hannah Tucker to be in charge of the money and the kids. So then she mentions her cousins, Jane, Sidney, and Nicholas Allen. And then in terms of actions, right, Hannah Tucker is going to handle the estate, make all major decisions. John Henry is apprenticing with Samuel Oldham. That will continue. And Ennis will, her languages continue in the family and be looked after and apprenticed to Hannah Tucker. And the Allen cousins will receive the estate if John Henry dies before the age of 21, the grandson, who's the primary person. So using the Notable Kentucky African Americans database that Raynette developed and other sources, we can actually trace some of these people. So we can find out that all of these were Hannah Tucker and Samuel Oldham, both were business owners in Lexington. And remember, this is 1842, so this is well before the Civil War. Hannah Tucker is in the 1838 city directory as a confectioner and dealer in fancy goods. And Samuel Oldham is a fashionable hairdresser. That's from the Notable Kentucky African Americans database that Raynette found, was how I found those listings. And then John Henry in the census records is one of several boys that is in Samuel Oldham's household. They seem to all be apprenticing. Okay, I just want to give you a quick example of what's possible from these deeds. Now, where are we with the students? And this is work that students are doing, because the stories behind the deeds are what really grabs student attention, and that's what I want students to be developing. But students, before the pandemic hit, they had thrown themselves into developing tools to help with this project, and then we were able, after the pandemic, to have it way better. The Digital Access Project was way beyond anything we could have imagined before the pandemic hit, and digital records became so important. Students have transcribed some of these deeds, like you can see the handwriting is difficult to read. As Shay mentioned, a lot of, or as Vanessa Holden mentioned, actually, a lot of students have difficulty reading cursive, but they will persevere and they will learn because they're fascinated by this history. Students have dug out stories from this. I've had several students get hold of a particular family, a particular deed, and really want to learn more about that. And then we have had students working with the intellectual architecture. Mason was part of a class last semester that was transcribing some of the deeds, digitizing some of the deeds, and starting to help think toward potential digital humanities projects that we may want to build from these deeds. So we have a number of students signed up for a class in the fall. I'm really excited that we've got a robust group that will be the first ones to work with some of the deeds that are now going to be digitally available. So we're thinking about how to deploy those students as transcribers and intellectual architects. So that's the quick and dirty version of the collaborative classroom piece of this project. And thank you so much for your attention. It's an honor and a pleasure to be with you today. And I'll turn it over to our students.
Hello, I've been volunteered to go first. I'm Shelby Roberts. I'm a PhD candidate in English, so I'm not a historian by any measure. And I got involved with this project through a forwarded email from the Appalachian Center. Oh, the mic is getting louder. Hello. And initially applied for the job because it was good money, and then stayed on because I cared about what I was doing. It's an interesting project in that you're sort of learning a new language in a lot of ways about how, not only how legally how things are coded, but also how, not to obscure the purchase and sale of people, but the ways in which it was so unconsidered that they would use different language than more than just like a purchase or an emancipation, that they could fall under personal property, that they could fall under estate property, right? That there are different categories in which that these people were labeled. And to see that through the whole project, I started with the indexes, and now we've made it to finishing all the books, and to see sort of the history change has been really interesting. So.
Hello, my name is Mason McIntyre. I needed one more history class in order to graduate. And it just so happened to be Kathy's that I chose, and we probably should have been shut down because it was just me and one other student, but we kept going, and now I'm here, and it's been a real blessing. It's been very powerful to see the people that we're helping down at the clerk's office, meeting people who come in to research their families and these stories. The clerk's office is only open Monday through Friday, 8 to 4:30. And a lot of people are busy during that time, working and everything. And to make these records more accessible is going to be very powerful to those people, as well as, these books are nasty and dusty and heavy. And so to, just be able to view them online, and they're not getting any better, so getting them digitized now is very important. And there's just a lot of powerful stories in these deeds. So, thank you.
Okay, Mason mentioned powerful stories, and I just want to give you one more that has been, the Mary Todd deed kind of haunted me from the moment Amy found it, and that is why I did a little research to try and find out at least a little something about the people in this deed, because she's clearly so ill, and it's so important to her to make arrangements for the young people in her care in particular. And it's a story of black women's relying on each other as well, because she wants to make sure that Hannah Tucker is running the show. So another deed that the very first group of students found is the emancipation deed from Willis Mitchell to Lewis Mitchell. There are self-emancipations in these deeds, quite a few, and there are also family emancipations in these deeds. This is a case of family emancipation. So in this deed, Willis Mitchell is freeing his brother, Lewis Mitchell. And he has, and Shay knows that I've just been, like, this story just, again, it haunts me. I really want to learn more about these brothers. And I have learned some things about the two of them using the kinds of techniques that Shay was introducing us to earlier. So Willis is a free man of color. He purchased his brother Lewis Mitchell in Virginia in 1830. At the time, Lewis was around 17 years old. In June 1830, the two are in Lexington. So he seems to have purchased Lewis in Culpeper County, Virginia in March. And then in June, the two of them are in Lexington, and Willis makes sure that this deed gets read into the record. That's the other thing. These are people who are denied literacy. Almost all the people in the deeds who are either, well, enslaved people didn't have access to creating deeds, but free black people who created deeds, almost all did not have access to literacy. We know that because they almost all sign with an X. Obviously, Malcolm X, Frank X. Walker, they're standing in solidarity with the people who had been denied literacy and were forced, therefore, to have to sign their name with an X. So, so this is true of Willis. It's true of Mary Todd. They're both signed with an X. They are navigating an incredibly complex legal system with remarkable savvy and care. It is so striking to me because this is a confusing system for educated people in the present day. I have a PhD, and I don't understand this system. These people were denied even the most basic access to literacy that would enable them to read and to write their name. And yet, they are finding compelling ways to use the legal system on behalf of the people that they care about. It is remarkable to me. Mary Todd is clearly doing that. And so is Willis Mitchell. So the deed emancipates, Willis emancipates Lewis on Lewis's 28th birthday in this deed that he reads in. And with my students, part of our job is to try and think about context here. Why, when he is enslaving Lewis now, does he want to wait 10 years to free his brother? He's clearly gone to great trouble. And in fact, I don't know, can you pull up the map on that? I'll show you. As an environmental historian and a historian of the Appalachians, I just want to emphasize the kind of trouble that Willis has gone to free his brother Lewis. This is the journey from Lexington to Culpeper County. I put this together when Mason and I were working on trying to think toward digital humanities sites. I'm an Appalachian historian. That goes straight through the Monongahela National Forest. You're going through West Virginia. Those mountains are terrifying in the present day. If you were walking through that area, that is a really difficult journey in the present day. And Willis is presumably making this journey of, it's a round trip of almost 1,000 miles to go get his brother, and then he brings him back. Clearly, he loves his brother. How did he get the money? No idea. How did he know where Lewis was? I mean, they're both young, very young men at the time, too. So in any case, so why would he, having done all this, clearly cared so much and made this journey, why would he then continue to keep his brother enslaved for 10 years? Well, thanks to my brilliant colleague Vanessa Holden, she helped me introduce students to some of the work of black scholars of slavery who helped put this in context. The single best way for Willis to protect Lewis was to keep him enslaved during his peak value as property, which was basically the exact time from about 17 to about 28. About 28 is when Lewis would have started to decrease in value as a commodity in this horrific system. So this is, so I believe that Willis deliberately kept Lewis enslaved. If you were trying to protect your brother, you would be hard pressed in this era to do a better job than what these documents do. Because he reads in there that no matter what, if he dies, if Willis himself passes away, I mean, if it's not clear in the legal record that Lewis is to be emancipated, then Lewis can get sold to somebody else and he's just caught in slavery forever. So the first thing, I think it's the first thing he does, when he gets back from Culpeper County, the first thing he does is make sure that the legal document makes it very clear that no matter what, Lewis is to be emancipated on his 28th birthday. And then he goes back 10 years later, they're still both alive, and he actually emancipates Lewis a little bit before that time. So there's a second emancipation deed, and you can see that he's like, okay, and he's making it very clear in the legal record. And so he's, in my view, he's totally doing this to protect Lewis. And this is a Herculean task on so many levels that he is doing. So then I got curious, and I won't go into this, but to get at Mason's point about the stories that are buried here, yeah, I'm curious, did it work? Like, was he actually able to protect Lewis? And it seems that it did. Lewis actually became a landholder. He got married. I found him in the census records. He seems to be a property owner. He seems to be landed. This is the sort of story that we want to use these deeds to bring out, because the level of dignity, the level of love, the level of creativity, innovation, intellect, determination is stunning to me, and that's why I want to keep doing the work.
Thank you.
We have a few moments for questions. If anybody has questions about DAP, the digitization process, what it's been like to work, we're happy to say that within a year, Shelby just talked about this, within her tenure, we've gone from indexes to now doing quality control on these scans. We're very close to making them publicly available. Are there any questions from our audience today? Yes. So the question is, have we had any pushback against this project? I can answer that if you want. So, and then you're welcome to also answer that. So here's the thing about these sorts of projects. I believe that doing work in community is also part of the strategy. So Shay mentioned a number of partnerships that we have. And those are folks who've directly contributed funds and funding to the project. It's what allows us to offer that good money for. I don't believe in hiring people to work on projects about chattel slavery for bad wages. That's just not a good. That's a little grimy. So we do pay $20 an hour, or offer course credit or other kinds of credit and compensation. So we've only had, I think, one person say they absolutely want to volunteer. And the other thing that Shay didn't mention is we have a lot of other eyes on this project. We have support in the mayor's office. We have support from Lex Park, of all places. Lex Park's never given me anything for free, but they actually have given parking passes to our volunteers and provided free parking for them while they're working at the clerk's office, which
The most valuable part, for sure.
I thought we were going to have to reimburse for parking the whole time. So I want to begin by saying the support is even more expansive than Shay had time to mention. And one way that we're able to marshal that level of support is that we're not cherry picking documents. We're not only looking for documents that connect to slavery. We're digitizing all. It's called the Digital Access Project because we're digitizing all of it. the clerk's office has a mandate to digitize their documents. They began digitizing in 1990, so what makes the most sense, particularly because it's an office that's used by legal professionals and realtors, is to start in December 1989 and work backwards. So one way that we're providing community service here is that while that digitizing is happening from 1989 backwards, we're digitizing from the 70 forwards, right? And so in some sort of transcontinental railroad level of planning, the two digitizations will meet. Thanks to the genius of Shay, the tracks won't miss each other. They actually will line up. So we're not only looking at enslaved people. It is a service to basically everybody. Now, as you can see, because you've had scholars walk you through here today how you do this work with these documents, once you find one name, if you only looked for the names of enslaved people, you'd miss the vast majority of the documents where this history is embedded. You have to look at everything to get there. So one of the ways that we've made sure to sort of insulate the project from the kinds of criticism that could be directed at it is that we're not only focusing on one kind of document, we have to do it all. Now, between you, me, and Al Green's internet that's watching us on the live stream in the back, the okey doke is, of course, that slavery was everywhere. They're all slavery documents, right? All of them are implied in this system. It is the economic system that is the bedrock of this society. We do what we can. Shay, do you have a response to if there's been any pushback?
Haven't had any pushback, but this project does pose an awe to people, like, whoa, what is this going to impact? How is it going to impact my life? Why can't we just move forward? And we understand the importance of the records, but really, what is the importance of the project itself? And people just want to move forward. But we don't need to move forward because we need to understand where we came from and how to get better. We need to understand that it's not just today that violence is bad, but at the very core root of the establishment of Kentucky out of the Commonwealth of Virginia, there was cruel violence. There was death, there was destruction, there was duels fought with deadly weapons. And by digitizing these records, and people can understand just where we came from, so now we can, instead of having the violence we have today, we should look at these records and see how our ancestors, forefathers, what they went through. And we should be more thankful and appreciated that we're in a land of opportunity today. We see those records, they were enslaved, but later we see them emancipated. We see oppression, but after 1865 we see opportunity. So that's what we need to understand, and everyone doesn't understand the wealth of the project, but I think once we get them online and people can see, I believe that we'll have more support, more enthusiastic people and donations made, that we can continue to pay people and continue to not only hit Lexington, Lafayette County, but our surrounding counties and even Kentucky. Kentucky were broken up in 3 counties in the early part of history: Fayette, Lincoln County, and Jefferson. So that's why Fayette County's records are important, because it served the district of communities around us.
And as you could see from the documents that Kathy walked you through, along with hearing about enslaved people's lives and their incredible legal savvy, we get to see free Black people in this community, business owners. I, for one, would like to know more about the fabulous hairdresser.
I certainly would too.
With the many apprentices, right? So there are so many ways these documents can teach us something impactful. about the past, but making them available in a way, we're not going to achieve perfect accessibility. Just putting something online doesn't mean it's accessible to everybody, but it does mean it's more accessible. I was just talking to someone the other day who talked about how many of these local archives don't have a place to sit when you have to stand to look at the books. And for elders, for folks with mobility concerns, standing on a tile floor in the basement of the clerk's office, trying to decipher these documents where even if you can read cursive, they're difficult to decipher. That's just not as accessible as, what did you suggest say? PJ research.
PJ research.
Now that we've lived through the pandemic, hard pants are out, soft pants only. This history is tough enough. So we have an opportunity here. And I also would just like to say I really appreciate our students joining us today. They've seen firsthand the excitement in people's faces when they find the document that they're looking for. They've contributed to the intellectual piece of this project. Yes, they did the scans, but they're not just labor. They figured out new settings on our Book Eye scanner. They helped Shay nail down the workflow and the instructions for volunteers that would follow them. They've trained other people on the project. They've helped us develop a really solid methodology for digitizing these kinds of documents. And so their contribution and the contribution of the other volunteers and student assistants and workers on this project is an invaluable contribution that ultimately serves our broader community. Folks, we don't even know who will be found yet in these records. With that, I'm gonna direct us all to take a brief break. We're gonna swap over our panels, and we'll get started with our next panel in about 5 minutes. So please take the chance to go to the little historian's room, grab some refreshment. Please thank our panelists, and we'll be back with you soon.